So this is going to be kind of a proof of concept sort of test, and the concept being tested here is the possibility of using drip irrigation emitters over trays of microgreens as a way to keep them moist. When you look at a typical microgreen setup, what you see is electric fixtures under trays that have water in them, and basically electricity and water do not mix that well, so it'd be nice to separate them if you can, and this is part of that concept. The second part of the concept that I'll discuss later has to do with arranging trays in such a way that you can use fewer light fixtures and save money and so on doing that. But here, what I'm starting with is just this top from a container of spinach that my wife buys at the grocery store. And what I'm going to do is just 2 layers of towels in here. Lays in fairly well. This will be my substrate, whatever I'm going to call it. I don't really have a small enough measuring glass anywhere in the house to really control this yet, but this is probably like about a 9-ounce beverage cup that you could buy in bulk. And the idea with the drip irrigation is that you would have 1 or 2 emitters over each tray. So basically, you know, if I just pour the water in the center of this setup here, see, and that's not even all that I have there, but it looks okay. So this is a measure of how long it would take for water to spread out in a drip irrigation system. And you can see it's spreading out quite a bit. So I'm going to put the rest of this in here, however much this is. You know, this is probably less than a minute to fill here. So that's probably a good metric. And for my test crop, I'm just going to use some hard red wheat to make some wheatgrass. Interesting point about hard red wheat is this is one of the crops that is being damaged because of the current weather. In Nebraska, some significant portion of the winter red wheat crop has been damaged. This could cause problems with supply later on. But yet I think, you know, using wheat for wheatgrass is a much better idea than using it for bread, actually. So in the future we may see that Africa once again, North Africa, once again becomes the breadbasket of the world, as it was in Roman times, or one of the breadbaskets. I mean, as recently as 2,000 years ago, what is now the Sahara Desert was savanna, and Carthage was one of Rome's possessions in North Africa, and it was a source of grain for Rome. And when the weather changed, the climate changed, and Carthage no longer produced as much grain, that became a problem for the empire and was one of the reasons why the empire fell. If you look around, read some history, what you're going to find out is that the world is littered with the bones of civilizations killed by drought. Civilizations basically meaning, technically meaning life in cities. Once upon a time, Timbuktu was one of the most famous centers of wealth and learning on the whole planet. And these days we use the word Timbuktu to refer to one of the most remote, inhospitable, unimportant places in the world. So that's how it changes. So you see some bubbles here. I'm not going to do much about those. Just leave them as is. So this is going to be my crop. We're also kind of getting in terms of discussions about whether or not you need to soak seeds. This is a pretty wet substrate here. I would suspect that the seeds will soak up moisture just as rapidly on this as they would if I soaked them in a dish. And also, when you think about it, when people grow wheat in the fields, they do not soak the seeds before they plant it. They just rely on moisture in the ground to do the work. So if I had a drip emitter over this and put a certain amount of water on this a certain number of times a day, these towels would remain moist and be a good medium for growing the wheat without becoming too moist. This particular tray does not have any drainage in it. Maybe trays need to have drainage, but as long as you don't put too much water on them, they're probably going to be okay. Just a final comment that, as usual, that tray of seeds will go on to a germination pad at about 70 degrees for a day or so. So I expect to see things pop pretty well. One thing I didn't do with that, which I probably should have done, was put a little bit of seaweed in it. Maybe I'll spray some in there or something like that at some point, but that would have been a good idea. A good reason for soaking the seed really is that you can inoculate them with the seaweed and whatever else you want to put in there. Also, the solution that I'm using on that is about 1/4 teaspoon of Microgreens hydroponic food in about 1.3 liters of water, and I also put 10 drops of a colloidal micronutrient solution that I buy at Rainbow in there to kind of add some of the really small nutrients. It would be better to be much more scientific about that, but that's a start.